Hello friends and welcome home. I'm Jamie James and we are in the last video of our 6-week break from homeschooling. And today we're talking about rest. I think that there's actually a couple forms of rest. So stay tuned to find out what those forms are and steps that you can take to try to achieve rest, even though it can be so hard for a homeschooling family. So grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and join me as we have this conversation. Rest. Let's talk about rest for a minute. I have thought long and hard about how to communicate rest with you because I actually find that rest can be very elusive and difficult to achieve. And it's actually something that my husband Craig and I have been sorting through the definitions and reading. We've actually read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, I think 2 times last year alone. And we're just trying to figure out, what does rest mean? So if you're like us, you might be trying to discover how to rest well for a family. And rest really looks different for everyone, doesn't it? Your rest will look different than my rest. Your season might be different than my season, with ages of kids or people you may have to take care of, or the extension of the expectations on your list right now. And I think that also comes with seasons. There are seasons of rest that we feel like we can settle down a little bit more, and seasons of push where we have to push through. But I do think that should be a season. Otherwise, it's a lifestyle. So there should be a moment where we take a breath or a break. So what are the 2 forms of rest you might be asking yourself that I consider rest anyway? The first part of rest is probably counterintuitive to what we think rest is. Rest itself could be counterintuitive because if you think about it, we feel like we have to keep working, keep pushing in order to improve our situation, our family, our finances. But there's actually been studies that show that workers who take rest do better when they are at work. They improve and they show higher results. And I think the same would be true of your family. If you actually take the moment to take a rest each week, you're going to see that your family is receiving the best you that they can. So the first form of rest feels a little different than what we normally talk about rest. And my husband and I find it very restful when we clean our home and we organize our things and take care of things that are a little disarrayed. It's a mental form of rest. So our brains have a very hard time, even if we sit down on the couch and try to check out. If there's chaos around us or things that are undone, it's hard for our brains to say, now is the time for rest. So I try to take 1 day a week. It's usually Friday, and I try to just organize and take care of things around our household so that we actually feel restful on our weekends. And if you're a working family in addition, it might be a Saturday that you rest this way so that on a Sunday you can actually rest in the second way. So ways that resting might be in this first form of rest, which is the taking care of tasks or taking care of things rest. That might be doing your laundry. That might be picking up and organizing the paperwork really quickly. It could be bills or picking up clutter around your house, tidying up your yard. Anything that just feels overwhelming or nagging in the back of your brain, it helps to take care of that. And that already might be on a to-do list during your week, but it's a form of rest. It's giving you a gift to say your brain can take a break from that nagging that is happening. So we here on our homestead have a lot of things that we need to take care of with the animals and the property. And so just by having that 1 day that we go and we just take care of things so that they're quieted in our mind and we know that it's well cared for and we're taking care of or being good stewards of our things, then that helps us rest well on our second rest. And our second rest, sometimes you might hear the word, Hebrew word Shabbat, or just a full stop is the popular thing to say right now. That is the rest where you are just slowing down. You are taking time with your family to do things that fill up your soul. So we want to think about not just sitting down in front of the TV, but actually turning off electronics and just taking time to do things that really fill us up. You could go for a hike and you might feel exhausted, but have way more rest internally than if you were to sit down and do a movie marathon. So we want to do things that are really feeling our soul and helping us to feel fulfilled. Some of those things that you might feel fulfilled in doing might be having a meaningful meal with your family or friends, doing board games or playing with your kids, doing things that are spiritual fulfilling. If you go to church, going to church would be filling your soul. Going for a hike or other family activities would be fulfilling for your soul. And I would also say just slowing down. In today's society, and it's interesting that we are post the pandemic, but yet we have started to ramp back up. We all felt when the pandemic started, I believe, kind of a like exhale because of the speed of life. At least a lot of people I know felt that way. But we have just continued to build back up to try to get back to normal. I think we need to make sure that we take time to go slow, and not go slow like we're sloths, but go slow like being intentional, having conversation, just taking a deep breath and looking outside at nature. Things that we take for granted will really give back and feed your soul. So that will look different for you also. If you are a more social person versus a more introverted person, that might look different, right? If you enjoy reading, that would be on your list. But if you would rather make a phone call, then that would be something that would fill your soul. So this is going to be something, and your list will look different for every single person. But I would suggest and recommend each of your family members and you just sitting down and thinking through what are things that are fulfilling for us and get those on the schedule. So how do we apply this to you as a homeschooling parent? I think it is imperative for you, who is always giving out to your kids, to your family, and to those around you. It's imperative that you then fill yourself up. So the first thing is take care of the personal things around you that are nagging you. And that could be those things that I listed earlier, the laundry or the dishes or something that needs to be organized. But there could be numerous other things that have been just put off to the side because of the busyness of life, right? The second thing is to intentionally take a 24-hour break. Schedule it in. Turn off, some people have turned off all of their social media apps. It's easy to remove and put an app back on your phone. Take them off. Take off your notifications. Take off your email if that is something that you feel the urge to run and go check. And just really be intentional and in the moment for those 24 hours. And it might feel a little like hard to get into that rhythm, or like almost robotic in a sense that you're trying to force yourself into rest if you haven't done it or haven't done it in a while. But just go through the motions of trying to be slow, trying to enjoy your family, your friends, a good meal. It's actually when we do it well, and there's times that we do and there's times that we don't. When we do it well, it is my favorite day of the week. And so I would highly encourage you also schedule it in, because if you don't put it on the schedule, you know how the life is, you will fill it up with things or activities, or even if it's not written down, you can add things to your to-do list and just skip on over that day that you would have rested had you written it down and been intentional with it, and plan it out. Maybe talk to your spouse or your kids, or just sit down and think about what would be a restful day for me. We want you to be the best homeschooling parent, the best worker, the best coworker, the best spouse that you can be. And that means that you have to have some really good rest. So I would encourage you to put that down and set boundaries. Don't think that this isn't going to come without resistance, because it's funny, but rest always has resistance with busyness. Somebody will need you to do something. Somebody will ask you to go ahead and break that meeting that you had with yourself, or that break that you had with yourself. And you need to be prepared. So Having it written in your calendar would be your first step. But then think about what you might say to someone who then asks you during that time. Is it going to be a one-off where one week they might ask you to do something and you're like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. We can break our rest for this 1 week, but then the next week we'll get into it? Or is it an ongoing thing? I think you really need to guard your time and be wise as well as giving, so that you can be the best that you can be in giving to others. So think about what your margin is, and you want to own your margin. You don't want to fill your margin. You want to think about this boundary as a guardrail for your life. You're saving your life by not going off the edge, not going too far, or maybe not your life physically, but maybe just your homeschooling or the lifestyle or the way you want to live. And you need that margin to guard you and guide you, to block you from making decisions that everyone in your family will feel, because you are the one who is setting course for your home with your kids and with the way that you start your days. And if you don't have that rest, then I would argue that you might not be giving your best to your family. So I would highly recommend sitting down and writing those things out, and then creating margin. So how do you say no in that moment? It might just be, this is not the best season for me, but ask again next time. I love that you thought of me. It could just be a no without any issues. I know some of you are better at this than me. And I would say that I am not the best, but I'm improving. And part of the way that I'm improving in guarding my margin is what I have mentioned in previous videos, is using my block schedule. So being able to know now, because I do it weekly, what each block requires of me or what I have scheduled out, I actually can say, this is the time that I have to do work. Does that work for you? Or this is the day that I'm already doing errands. Could we fit it in on that day? Because I will be in town and I'll be doing other things. Does that work for you? So I can always come back and recommend or suggest days that work better for me. So I know whether or not a no has to happen, since I like to say yes. So with this idea of rest, before I leave you, I just wanted to leave you with this last adage. There is a story there's two men in the woods. They're both woodcutters using axes, and they are both out in the woods to cut trees for the day. The old man frequently stops once an hour, and he stops cutting wood and takes a rest. The young man had just gotten in there, with all of his young exuberance, and was hacking and cutting like quickly, and he never took breaks. And he noticed the old man kept taking breaks. Every hour the old man took breaks, and he thought, well, I guess he's old. And he just kept hacking away at his trees and cutting off those rounds. At the end of the day, the old man and the young man looked at their work and compared, and the old man had actually cut more rounds than the young man. And the young man said, how can this possibly be? I cut all day, I didn't take a break, and I cut harder and stronger than you did. And the old man said, well, what you thought was breaks that I was taking was actually me stopping to sharpen my axe. And just the same could be said for you. We have to stop and sharpen ourselves, hone ourselves to become a better person, to strengthen ourselves for the tasks ahead, so that we can cut without as much effort and cut more quickly. We don't want to be the foolish young man who just plows ahead thinking that it's a sprint. We want to be prepared for the marathon. Raising our children is a marathon. We don't want to fall short of the end mark because we exhausted ourselves trying to fit in too many things and not taking care of ourselves. And we don't want to exhaust our children either. There's so many good opportunities. We want our kids to be able to rest also. We want them to learn by modeling and by example how to care for ourselves and how to structure our time well. And we don't want them to be exhausted and wishing that they weren't doing homeschooling either. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that you find some good rest. I'd love to hear what it is that you do to find rest in your weeks, and I look forward to talking to you next time.